Hi everybody and welcome back to part 2 of our new Flower Class Corvette build. This is the Revell 144 scale kit. And in part 1 I managed to put the hull together with a bit of difficulty. I had some warps along the plastic parts, but fitting the foredeck has pulled it all together, so it's okay now. I did have quite a bit of difficulty with fitting the transom part at the back here, and it's a pretty poor fit in the Revell kit. Needed quite a bit of work and filling to get it right, but it's almost there now. I've just got a little bit more to do. One thing I am going to have to tackle is this prow of the ship here, because I've been checking all the reference photographs I've got of the Snowbury, and the prow of the ship was very sharp, and on the Revell moulding we have this square section at the front. The other problem with the Revell moulding is that the shear on the front of the bow is too steep, and I'm going to try and do a little bit with that. I'm not going to be able to correct it completely because that would need some really serious surgery to build the front of the ship up, and I don't want to do that. It's not too bad. But what I'll do is, as I modify this squared front and sharpen the prow up, I'll try and cut it back a little bit at the front and square it off a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. The other thing that I need to do is to remove all the rig-holes on the portholes and replace those with some Pontos brass ones. And also the positioning of the portholes, particularly here at the stern, is a bit off. So I've filled them in, I've sanded the rig-holes off, and I've filled the portholes in with some Mr. Hobby White filler. And I'll re-drill the portholes in the correct places. The front of the ship's okay, it's just apparently the stern ones that are a bit off, so I'll just be dealing with those. And removing them isn't a problem either, because, as I said, I'll be replacing the portholes and rig-holes with etched brass ones from Pontos. I mustn't forget to fit the stabilisers on the bottom of the ship, and then I've just got to clean up around the decks, fit the quarter deck, and hopefully we'll be ready for doing some painting before the end of the video. I hope so. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is sort out the forecastle deck. There's just one or two gaps around the edges, and then it's going to need some tidying up. So I'll do the filling with some Mr. White putty. There's quite a big gap here right at the front. This can be drying whilst I do the rest of the work. I'm also going to fill the holes for the plastic railings. I'll drill the new ones out when I come to fit the Pontos parts. I'm pretty sure we're not going to need the Revell ones. While I've got the putty out, I just want to do a little bit of a mod here at the back. The very stern at the underside, just near the rudder here, it's very rounded on the Revell kit, and actually there was quite an angle on that. It was quite sharp at that point, running up to the plate here. So I'm just going to build that up with a little bit of the putty, and that'll just give me something to help reshape the stern here. It won't need an awful lot, but I just want to try and recreate that sharp angle here at the back. There's an excellent photograph of Snowbury taken both from head on and directly aft, so it's a good reference to add this little detail. So having built that material up, I should be able to shape that a little bit better. See if we can recreate that sharpness at the back there. So while that putty on the stern is drying, I'll go ahead and remove the rest of the wriggles on the hull. I've already done the port side, so we can just sand those off. And having the primer on helps actually, because it just gives us a visual clue when we're down to the hull side level. Apart from the added detail of the Pontos wriggles and porthole surrounds, it also corrects some of the moulding errors in the Revell kit, because not all of the wriggles are moulded centrally to the porthole. So some of them are a bit offset and they look a bit strange. So this job will kill two birds with one stone really. Okay, so let's have a look at the porthole work that I'm going to be doing. On the port side, we just have this forward one missing in the Revell moulding, so I've marked that out ready to drill out. The other ones are okay. This one here just in front of the brake is in the wrong place. It needs to be moved slightly aft, so that will be filled and we'll open that one up. I'll just fill that now whilst I remember. Another good way to fill a hole like that would be to get some stretch sprue, and as you stretch the sprue, the part nearest the unheated sprue is thickened, so you get a kind of a wedge plug shape which would go in there, and with some cement, once it's dry, you could sand it down and you'd have a perfectly filled hole. The other feature that's missing is this oval shaped hole here. I'm assuming it was for mooring the ship, so I'm going to cut those out. The portholes at the aft side of the ship are fine. On the starboard side we have the same issue here with the porthole being too far forward, so I've already filled that, and we've got the opening here to do. The worst problem here is at the stern, where the portholes that Revell give us are in the wrong positions. So I've filled the Revell mouldings in using putty, and that's sanded down smooth, and then we've got the correct position of the four portholes marked up there. I'm just going to let all that putty dry and do some work on the prow of the ship. So what I want to be doing here is removing this square moulding from the kit. And while I'm doing that, I'll just cut the bow back a little bit and try and get something a bit squarer at the front, just to remove this very steep shear on the front of the Revell kit. But the first thing I'll do is remove this square. So I'm basically going to be sanding this so that it's flush with the line of the plating here. And that should, when we've done it on both sides, it should give us a nice sharp front to the ship. So we need to go careful here. I don't want to be adding a lot of putty to correct it where I've gone too far, so take this nice and steady. I'm kind of doing a section at a time, so I try and retain the plating, but I might not be able to do that. I might need a bit of filler on this. So I'll just do a little bit on both sides, just until the shape that I want starts to come together. I don't want to remove too much on one side and then end up removing more material further back in the hull, because that'll just accentuate the problem with the shear that we've got. So nice and steady until we get that sharpness appearing. You can see here where I've been concentrating. We're getting that shape appearing now. It is important to go slowly with this, so I'll carry on working at that. So here I've just taken the very front of the bow back, just at the top. So that's just straightened the profile up a little bit. It's still not exactly right, but it's not quite as sheer as it was, and I think that's a bit of an improvement. But I don't go any further because I'll start to lose the detail on the deck, so I'm not going to be able to do much more with that. So I now need to come back in and sharpen the bow up again. So I've taken quite a bit of material off there, so it's very square at the moment, so just having to be careful here not to damage the hose pipe openings. And I'll have to reinstate the plating at the front as well. You see the shape's coming back. So again, I'll carry on working on that until I'm happy with the upper part of the modification, and then I'll just remove the area around the keel here. So carry on, we'll see what it looks like in a few minutes. Okay, so that's all done at the bow now. I've spent probably half an hour getting that sorted out, so it's nice and sharp now. Remove the square off the front. The plating's been reinstated. Just using a square edge file just to get the plating back. And then the bow will be done. It's a bit better than it was. Doesn't quite have the shear, although I've only taken about 3mm off the top. But it does look slightly squarer, so I'm happy with that. And we've got a nice sharp bow on the ship now. So that's all good. Let's get that plating redone. So just use a piece of Dymo tape just to get these nice and straight. So while I'm waiting for this putty to dry, it's taking a while, I'll sort the portholes out. So first thing I'll do is just clear out the Revell holes. Just make them nice and round. Some of them, because of the way the injection mould is done, are slightly oval, so this just makes a neater job of them. The next thing I'll do is just mark the centre of the holes that I'm going to drill, and I'll just put a piece of tape along here just to make sure that they're all at the same height. So with the portholes marked with the punch, I'll just drill them out now. We also have this one that's too far forward on the Revell moulding. Okay, just coming back to the stern now, and I've just managed to reshape this back end a little bit just so that it's a bit more ridged here, and I did it mainly using a knife, just scraping the plastic away so that it's less rounded, and I've got this sharper ridge down the middle which you can see on photographs of the stern. So I'm going to leave that now. I think it's probably as good as I'm going to get it, but scraping on both sides like that has just given that ridge down the middle. I've just got a couple more holes to open up in the hull. So that's this one here for a Pontos part, and this one here which isn't in the Revell moulding at all. So we'll get those done next. So I'll start with this one. Now Pontos give us some little ovals here just to smarten the edge of those new holes up. They do get the wrong number for these in the instructions. I think they're 480 in the instructions, but they're actually parts 342. So it's a bit sad that the first Pontos part I come across to fit has got the wrong number on it. It's something that happened an awful lot with the hood. So what I do with these is just drill them out and then push the drill backwards a little bit, so it gives us that oval hole. You just have to be careful just to keep it in a straight line. And then we just have to go in with a sharp knife and just open it up a little bit more. And just check all the time with the brass part that's going to cover it. Just have to go carefully with this, because if I remove too much, it's not an easy fix. And then just to finish it off, I'm using a round file just to round the edges off a little bit. I'll just put a bit of extra thin on the burr marks just to get rid of them. I'll smooth them out. This is a new hole altogether, so I'll drill this out, just centre mark it, drill two holes next to each other, then I can join them together with a sharp knife. And again, come in with the file. Okay, you can fit the portholes now. So these are the Pontos parts. I might need a few more than that. And I'm going to be using a wax pencil like this just to position them. So I'll fit the portholes now, and I just want to put a very fine bead of super glue around the outside, and then position the porthole, obviously rig all upwards. These pencils are really good for positioning etch brass. So that's all we have to do, just work all the way around. These portholes are not mentioned in the Pontos instructions, and I remember they weren't with the hood either. And there's a bit of a problem with that, because this is one of the first jobs that you do on the ship, and it would be easy to miss that they're there on the frets. You'd obviously realise later on in the build, but by then it'd be too late to actually fit them. So I'll just finish this side off, and then off camera I'll do the port side. Okay, I need to fit the bilge keels now, get them on the right way up. I've already done the port one. I'm using some quick drying thin glue for this. This is Tamiya's. I'll just put a little bit of tape on that just to hold it in position. Just until I glue the rest. They're a nice fit onto the hull side. The profile's just right, so they don't look too bad at all. You obviously check them under a coat of primer, but I think they'll be alright. Okay, so that's all the hull work done. So all the portholes are in place, all the changes in position have been done. We've got the little openings here with the etched brass surrounds. I've moved these portholes here a bit further aft. Same on the other side. The prow of the ship looks a bit squarer now, so that's a bit better. And we've got rid of the keel at the bottom. At the back I've sorted the transom out, and we've got that slightly ridged shape to the stern now, and all the plating's been redone, so I think we'll give that a coat of primer and let's see if there's any final bits of work to do before we put the first coats of paint on. Okay, so that's the primer on. There's one or two little bits of cleaning up to do, the bits of dust to remove. There's a couple of tiny pinholes here and there, but generally I'm happy. I'll be able to get some paint on that in the morning once this is fully hardened up and I've done those last repairs. I think I'll fit the quarterdeck in place now, and you can see that I've filled in some of the location holes for the Revell plastic part. So these 8 locations here are for the 2 depth charge racks, and these are for the depth charge throwers, which I'm not going to need. I'm likely to use some 3D printed parts for the depth charge throwers and the stern racks as well, so I can fill these in. If you're just using the Revell parts, obviously you wouldn't fill these, and also the Pontos depth charge throwers use the Revell base, so you wouldn't fill these in either case. It's just that I'm using some 3D parts on the model. Something else that Pontos don't mention is to remove these 2 doors here on the quarterdeck brake, but I've checked through the instructions and there are 2 spare doors that aren't referred to in the instructions, so I can take these off and I'll replace them with the brass ones in the set. So I'll just chisel them off and then smarten them up with a file. And the other thing I'm going to do is remove this rib here. It's a supporting rib for the forward edge of the quarterdeck, but it's not deep enough really. So I'm going to add some styrene to that to give a stronger support for the quarterdeck at the front. So I'll just remove that all together. So to reinforce this quarterdeck, I've got some angle here It's just an L-shape angle, and that'll give that whole face to fit onto the mid-deck bulkhead. So I'm going to glue that onto the bulkhead, and I'll just use the line that I can see from the previous moulding. So that's much stronger. It'll provide much more support to the quarterdeck once we get it into place. So now that I've got it all cleaned up, there's no reason why I can't fit that into position. Just do a quick test fit. That goes in nicely, nice and snug up to the bulkhead there. That's a nice fit, and that shelf is very strong now. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that into position. Then I can use some of my pegs to pull the whole sides onto the deck, just like that. And then I can go around with the cement and get that located. Got a gap at the back here, but I want to get this set up first, and then I'll just go around the outboard side with some milliput just to fill that gap in. So that's a pretty good result. I can leave that overnight now just to set the quarterdeck, and then we'll come back tomorrow. We can do some painting, I think. Okay, so that's the hull with its second coat of primer, the black primer. And actually I think the black primer is easier to show up any errors than the grey. It's slightly more glossy, so that really accentuates if you've got any more work to do. But I'm happy with that now. I'm not going to do any more messing around with it. So we're ready for the top coats, at least on the hull. I won't get round to doing the deck in this episode, but the hull is mainly in white with a camouflage colour of a very pale green, a duck egg green, a bit like RAF Sky I suppose, and a very pale blue as well. And the underside, the Revell instructions tell us to paint the underside in red, but I'm going to be doing this in black. The references I've seen suggest that the underside was repainted in black, so we've got another hood situation going on here as far as the underside goes. But I'm going to be happy with doing it in a black. It's not going to be a stark black. I'll use a rubber black or maybe a NATO black for the bottom side. And I'm going to retain a little bit of the black in this base colour, just as a bit of shading on the model as well, just to give it a bit of interest. I don't want pure white showing on the model, so I'll concentrate on the centres of the panels and see how we go with that. So the white I'm using is Tamier's LP35. This is Insignia white, and it's actually a very, very pale grey. It's not stark at all, so I think you might be able to see there it's just an off shade. And when I use that in combination with a black base, it shouldn't look too bad at all. So I've got the airbrush loaded up. The paint's thin 50-50. I want some nice thin coats of the white on this. So we'll go in and see how it looks. The next step I'm going to do is to add a little bit of red into this, so a bit of dull red, Tamiya's lacquer paint, which can be used for anti-fouling red really. So that'll just add another tone to the colour. I'll come back with the white now. I'm just going to be going backwards and forwards with this until I'm happy with it. Okay, so that's the hull as far as I can go today, and that's because halfway through that process the compressor has packed in. So I'm not going to be able to do any more painting until I've got a new one. I've had it apart and I think something quite serious has gone with the motor, so it's going to be a replacement, I'm afraid. Which means that I'm not going to get as much done as I hope to have done in this video. The hull is only halfway through at this stage, so there's plenty of work to do to get the final white on. It's obviously far too accentuated at the moment in terms of the shading. That's not what it'll look like at the end. Okay, so that's obviously as much as I can do, and I've left the ship in quite a state. As you can see, this is completely over exaggerated, the shading coats that I've got on there, and the white top coats and the camouflage colours will obviously mask a lot of that, so that's not what it will look like in the end. Although these Flower Class ships were very hard working and were often very tatty, I'm not sure they looked exactly like that, so there's a bit more work to do on that yet. But obviously without the compressor I can't finish the painting of the hull as I fully intended to do this week and as I set out to do at the beginning of the video. But the good news is that another compressor is on its way. I've tried to repair the existing one. I've had it apart and I think that the motor's burned out completely. So I'm not going to get any more life out of that. I'm going to be using it as spares. It's too late to get the whole video finished for Friday as I intended. But what I will do is when the compressor arrives, probably over the weekend sometime, I'll get straight on and finish the hull painting, and I'll publish that as a separate supplementary video early next week, I hope, just to round off what I set out to do at the beginning of the week. So that's it for this one. I've got a short week as a result of the breakdown. I don't want to be setting off and doing anything else. I want to get the hull finished. But hopefully I'll see you for the next video, the supplementary video, in 3 or 4 days' time, when I'll show you the rest of the painting work. And then I'll be moving on over the rest of the week with the next part of the build in part 4, which will be as usual on Friday, providing everything keeps going. So until I see you next time, everybody, stay safe, enjoy your modelling. I hope all your compressors out there keep going, unlike mine. And I'll see you in another few days for continuation of the Flower Class build. Bye for now.